They called me a kidnapper for raising my own grandsons. Your Honor, this woman kidnapped my children. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat in that cold courtroom, my hands shaking as I gripped the wooden bench, staring at the woman who had just called me a kidnapper. My own daughter, Jessica. The same daughter who had walked out on her 3 little boys 15 years ago and never looked back. But she had no idea what I was about to pull out of my purse. Let me back up and tell you how I got to this moment. It was March 23, 2023, and I was sitting in the Buncombe County Courthouse in Asheville, North Carolina, facing the fight of my life. Not for my life, for my boys, for Michael, Tyler, and Brandon, who had been my whole world for 15 years. My name is Victoria Williams, and I'm 67 years old. I live here in my cozy house in West Asheville, where the Blue Ridge Mountains roll right up to my backyard, and you can still hear the train whistle echo through the valleys at night. This is the house where I raised my grandsons after their mother abandoned them, where we built pillow forts in the living room and did homework at the kitchen table every single night. Tell me in the comments what you're doing right now while you listen to my story. Are you folding laundry, driving to work, or maybe sitting in your own kitchen, thinking about family? Hit that like button because each like is so important to help my voice reach other grandparents who are fighting these battles. And subscribe to Grandma's Legacy because sometimes the people who raise children aren't the ones who gave birth to them. Now I sit here in my sunny breakfast nook, looking out at the garden where my boys, well, they're young men now at 19, 21, and 23, used to play catch and build tree forts. The morning light filters through my lace curtains, and I can still see their handprints on the sliding glass door from when they were small. It's peaceful now, but that day in court, my world felt like it was falling apart. You see, I never planned to raise children again at 52 years old. I had raised Jessica, done my time with diapers and sleepless nights and teenage drama. When she got pregnant the first time at 19, I helped her through it. When she had Tyler 2 years later, I babysat so she could work. When Brandon came along 2 years after that, I started to worry about how she was handling 3 little ones, but I figured every young mother struggles. But on December 15th, 2008, a date burned into my memory forever, Jessica made a choice that changed all our lives. She packed a bag while the boys were sleeping, left a note on my kitchen counter that said, "I can't do this anymore," and vanished into the night. Michael was 8, Tyler was 6, and Brandon was only 4 years old. She left them. Just left them. I found them the next morning when I came to babysit, wondering why Jessica wasn't answering her phone. 3 confused little boys asking where Mommy went, and me trying to figure out how to explain that sometimes people leave and don't come back. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of scraped knees and bedtime stories, parent-teacher conferences and Little League games, first days of school and graduation ceremonies. 15 years of being the only mother those boys really knew. I thought about Jessica sometimes, wondered if she was safe, if she ever thought about her children. But I never expected her to come back, and I certainly never expected her to come back with a lawyer, pointing her finger at me and calling me a criminal. Looking back now, I can see that the hardest battle of my life was just beginning, and I had no idea how ugly it was going to get before the truth finally came to light. To understand how 3 little boys ended up in my care, you need to know who Jessica was before she became a mother. She wasn't always the woman who walked out on her children. No, the Jessica I raised was sweet and smart, with dreams of becoming a teacher and a laugh that could fill up a room. Jessica Marie Williams was born in 1982, right here in Asheville when this town was still more mountain community than tourist destination. Her daddy, my late husband Robert, worked at the paper mill, and I was a nurse at Mission Hospital. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Jessica grew up riding her bike down these winding mountain roads, collecting fireflies in mason jars, and spending summers at her grandparents' farm in Madison County. She was a good student, made decent grades, had a close group of friends from church. When she graduated from Asheville High in 2000, she got accepted to Western Carolina University to study elementary education. Robert and I were so proud. Our little girl was going to be the first in our family to get a college degree. But college changed her. Or maybe it just revealed parts of her personality that had been hiding. She started calling less, coming home with different friends, different attitudes. She dropped out halfway through her sophomore year, moved back home, and started working at a restaurant downtown. That's where she met Derek, Michael's father. Derek was trouble from day one. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at our furniture like he was calculating what it might be worth. He was older than Jessica, had a motorcycle and a criminal record, and treated our daughter like she was lucky to have his attention. When Jessica got pregnant at 19, Derek stuck around just long enough to get his name on the birth certificate before disappearing back to wherever he came from. Michael was born in May 2000, a beautiful baby with his mother's dark hair and his grandmother's stubborn chin. For a while, having a baby seemed to settle Jessica down. She moved into the apartment above Mrs. Chen's garage just down the street from me, and I helped her navigate those first overwhelming months of motherhood. But Jessica was restless. She'd drop Michael off at my house for just a few hours and come back 8 hours later, full of stories about friends she'd met at the club or guys who'd bought her drinks. I started keeping extra diapers and formula at my house just in case. Tyler's father was a man named Marcus who worked construction and seemed nice enough until Jessica told him she was pregnant. Then he became another name on a birth certificate and nothing more. Tyler arrived in 2002, a sweet, quiet baby who seemed to sense that his world wasn't quite stable. By the time Brandon came along in 2004, fathered by someone Jessica met at a party and never saw again, the pattern was clear. Jessica would be an enthusiastic mother for a few weeks. Then the responsibility would overwhelm her, and she'd start leaving the boys with me more and more often. I didn't mind. Lord knows, I loved those boys like they were my own. Michael was serious and thoughtful, always trying to take care of his younger brothers. Tyler was the peacemaker, the one who could sense tension and try to smooth it over with jokes or hugs. And Brandon was pure sunshine, the kind of child who could find joy in a cardboard box and a handful of crayons. But watching Jessica struggle broke my heart. She'd go through periods where she seemed to have it together. She'd get a new job, maybe a new boyfriend who seemed stable, and she'd talk about getting her life on track. Then something would happen. The job would get too stressful, the boyfriend would disappoint her, or she'd just get that restless look in her eyes again. The boys started calling me Grandma Vicky when they were tiny, but as they got older and Jessica became more unreliable, I became just Grandma. The person they called when they were sick, the one who showed up at school plays, the safe harbor in their increasingly chaotic world. By 2008, Jessica was barely functioning as a mother. She'd disappear for days at a time, leaving the boys with me while she went on trips with friends I never met. She'd come back full of apologies and promises to do better, but the boys had stopped believing her. 8-year-old Michael once asked me, "Grandma, when Mommy goes away, she always comes back, right?" The uncertainty in his voice broke my heart. I should have seen the final abandonment coming, but I guess I kept hoping she'd figure it out, that maternal instinct would kick in, and she'd realize what she had in those 3 beautiful boys. Instead, she left a note on my kitchen counter and broke 3 little hearts in the process. That night, as I tucked those confused, frightened children into the beds in my spare room, I made them a promise. I would never leave them. No matter what happened, they would always have a home with me. I just never imagined that promise would land me in a courtroom, accused of kidnapping the children I'd raised as my own. After Jessica disappeared, the transition wasn't smooth, but it was necessary. 3 traumatized little boys needed stability, routine, and most importantly, they needed to know that someone was going to stay. I immediately called my lawyer, Bill Patterson, who'd handled Robert's will when he passed in 2003. Bill helped me file for emergency custody, and since Jessica was nowhere to be found, the court granted it without much fuss. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. Michael had nightmares every night, waking up screaming for his mommy. Tyler started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 3. And Brandon, my sweet little 4-year-old, would follow me around the house asking, "Grandma, Are you going away too? But we figured it out, day by day. I converted my sewing room into a bedroom for Brandon, and the older boys shared the guest room with bunk beds. We established routines: breakfast at 7, homework at the kitchen table after school, dinner together every night at 6, bedtime stories for everyone. I learned how to braid hair for school picture day, how to pack lunch boxes with things they'd actually eat, and how to referee fights between brothers without losing my mind. I also kept everything. Every single paper that came home from school, every permission slip I signed, every medical form for doctor visits and sports physicals. Something in my gut told me to document everything, to keep proof that these boys were being cared for, loved, and raised properly. I had 3 filing cabinets in my bedroom closet, organized by year and by child, full of the evidence of our life together. The years rolled by. Michael played baseball and made honor roll. Tyler discovered a talent for art and covered my refrigerator with drawings of our family, always 4 stick figures, never 5. Brandon learned to ride a bike in my driveway and charmed every teacher he ever had with his sunny personality. I attended every parent conference, every school play, every graduation. I was the emergency contact on every form, the person who picked them up when they were sick, the one who cheered from the bleachers at every game. We heard from Jessica exactly 3 times in 15 years, a birthday card for Michael when he turned 10 with no return address, a Christmas card in 2015 with a picture of her and some man I didn't recognize, postmarked from Florida, and a Facebook message to Tyler on his 16th birthday that just said, "Hope you're doing well. Love, Mom." Each contact sent the boys into emotional tailspins. Michael would get angry and withdrawn. Tyler would spend hours staring at the card or message, trying to read meaning into words that had no depth. Brandon, who barely remembered her, would ask questions I couldn't answer. Why doesn't she want to see us? Did we do something wrong? I tried to keep my answers neutral, to not poison them against their mother. But it was hard. How do you explain abandonment to children without creating more pain? How do you tell a little boy that sometimes people are just too broken to love properly? As the boys got older, they stopped asking about Jessica. She became like a ghost story, something that had happened to them once, but not part of their real life. Their real life was homework and chores, family dinners and weekend trips to see the waterfalls in the mountains. Their real life was the 3 of them and me, figuring out how to be a family in our own unique way. Michael graduated from high school in 2018 and started at UNC Asheville, studying business. He lived at home to save money and helped me with household repairs that I couldn't manage anymore. Tyler graduated in 2020 during COVID, so we had a socially distanced celebration in the backyard and went to community college for graphic design. Brandon was my baby, graduating this past spring and planning to start at Appalachian State in the fall. They were good boys. No, they were good men now. They worked part-time jobs, paid for their own cars, helped with groceries and utilities. They brought girlfriends home for dinner and called me when they were running late. They were respectful, responsible, and kind. Everything you'd want your children to become. I thought we were safe. I thought the hard part was over. Then, on March 15th, 2023, a process server knocked on my door. The papers he handed me made no sense at first. Jessica Marie Williams versus Victoria Ann Williams. Petition for return of minor children and damages. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Jessica was suing me for custody of Brandon, who was still 17, and claiming that I had unlawfully retained her children for 15 years. The petition painted a picture of me as a manipulative old woman who had stolen her grandchildren and poisoned them against their mother. It claimed that Jessica had been working to rebuild her life and was now ready to resume her parental responsibilities. It demanded immediate custody of Brandon and financial compensation for 15 years of lost relationship with all 3 boys. I called Bill Patterson with shaking hands, but he'd retired 2 years earlier. His partner, Sarah Mitchell, took the case and explained the legal reality. Jessica still had parental rights. Despite abandoning her children for 15 years, despite never paying a dime of child support or making any effort to contact them, she was still their legal mother. "But Victoria," Sarah said gently, "these aren't children anymore. Michael and Tyler are adults. She has no claim on them. And Brandon will be 18 in 6 months. The court will consider his wishes heavily at his age." That should have been comforting, but I was terrified. What if Jessica had changed? What if she could convince the boys that I had kept them from her? What if 15 years of love and sacrifice could be erased by a smooth-talking mother who suddenly wanted them back? The really sick part was the timing. Brandon's 18th birthday was in September. If Jessica regained custody, she'd have legal control over a boy who'd been raised by someone else, just months before he became an adult. Something about that timing felt calculated, purposeful. I didn't know it yet, but my instincts were right. Jessica's sudden maternal interest had nothing to do with love and everything to do with money. And before this was over, I'd learned just how far some people will go when greed disguises itself as motherhood. The first court hearing was scheduled for April 10th, 2023. Walking into that courthouse with Sarah Mitchell, I felt like I was marching to my own execution. But I wasn't walking in empty-handed. I carried a large manila envelope, thick with 15 years of proof that love shows up every single day. Jessica was already seated at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. She looked different, older, obviously, but also polished in a way that seemed artificial. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup perfect, her clothing conservative and motherly. She had dressed the part of the reformed mother seeking justice. When our eyes met across that courtroom, I searched her face for any sign of the daughter I had raised, the young woman who had once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. But all I saw was a stranger wearing Jessica's face. "Your Honor," her lawyer began, "my client is here today to reclaim what was stolen from her 15 years ago. Ms. Williams took advantage of a young mother going through a difficult period and unlawfully retained custody of her children. Ms. Jessica Williams has spent years rebuilding her life, getting the help she needed, and she's now ready to be the mother her children deserve." Then Jessica took the stand, and I listened in amazement as she rewrote history. According to her testimony, she had been struggling with postpartum depression and had asked me to help with the boys for a little while until she could get back on her feet. She claimed I had manipulated the situation, filed for custody behind her back, and then systematically kept her away from her children. "I tried to maintain contact," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I sent cards and messages, but Victoria made it clear I wasn't welcome. She poisoned my boys against me, told them I didn't love them, made them afraid to reach out to me. Every word was a lie, but she delivered it with such conviction that I started to doubt my own memory. Had I been too harsh in my judgment? Had I kept her away when she tried to return?" Then Sarah stood up for my cross-examination, and I remembered who I was dealing with. "Ms. Williams, you say you were struggling with postpartum depression. Did you seek treatment for this condition?" "Well, no, but did you maintain regular contact with your children after leaving them with their grandmother?" "I tried, but Ms. Williams, in 15 years, how much child support did you pay for the care of your 3 sons?" Jessica's face flushed. "I was going through financial difficulties. That's $0, isn't it? Not 1 penny in 15 years. The questioning continued, and with each answer, Jessica's story fell apart. She couldn't explain the long gaps between contact, couldn't provide addresses where she'd lived, couldn't even remember the boys' birthdays correctly when Sarah asked. Then it was my turn to testify, and I walked to that witness stand carrying my envelope. "Your Honor, I've brought documentation of the past 15 years, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I opened the envelope and began laying out the contents on the table. Photos of birthday parties Jessica never attended, report cards she never signed, medical forms with my signature on every line, doctor visits, emergency room trips, surgery permissions, sports physicals. I showed the court pictures of Christmas mornings, first days of school, baseball games, art shows, graduations. 15 years of a life Jessica had chosen not to be part of. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I hadn't stolen these children. I had saved them. But the real moment of truth came when Judge Martinez asked to speak with the boys individually. Michael and Tyler, as adults, spoke first. They were respectful but clear. They had no relationship with Jessica and no desire to build one. Then it was Brandon's turn. At 17, tall and serious like his oldest brother, he walked into that courtroom and sat in the witness chair. Judge Martinez asked him the question that would determine his future. "Brandon, you've heard the testimony today. Your biological mother is seeking custody. What do you want?" Brandon looked at Jessica for a long moment, and I held my breath. Then he looked at me, and I saw 15 years of love and trust in his eyes. "Your Honor, I don't really know her," he said quietly. "She's been gone my whole life. But I guess I'd like the chance to try if that's what she really wants." My heart broke and healed at the same time. Even after everything, my sweet boy was willing to give his mother a chance. But then he continued, "But I want to finish high school where I am. I want to graduate with my friends. And I want to go to college at App State like I planned. If she wants to be part of that, okay. But I'm not starting over somewhere else with someone I don't know. If you're feeling the tension of this family being torn apart right now, show your support. Hit that like button, comment if you've been through something similar with custody battles, and subscribe because we grandparents need to stick together through these impossible situations." That's when Jessica's lawyer made a crucial mistake. Instead of accepting Brandon's reasonable conditions, he pushed for immediate custody, for Brandon to move in with Jessica and her new husband in Charlotte to transfer schools for his senior year. "Your Honor, my client has been denied her parental rights for 15 years. She shouldn't have to negotiate visitation with the person who kept her children from her." Judge Martinez looked skeptical. "Mr. Thompson, this young man is 17 years old, 6 months from legal adulthood. He's expressed a willingness to build a relationship with his mother while maintaining stability in his life. That seems reasonable." But Jessica's lawyer pressed on, and that's when Sarah Mitchell played our ace in the hole. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess. New evidence has come to light that the court needs to see." During the recess, Sarah handed me a folder that made my blood run cold. While preparing for trial, she had hired a private investigator to look into Jessica's background. What he found was going to change everything. Jessica wasn't just a reformed mother seeking her children. She was a woman with a plan, a motive, and a secret that was about to blow up in her face. The recess felt like it lasted forever. Sarah Mitchell spread the private investigator's findings across the table in the courthouse hallway, and with each document, the pieces of Jessica's puzzle fell into place in the most sickening way possible. "Victoria, you need to see this," Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. "Jessica married a man named Craig Hoffman 6 months ago. He's facing federal charges for tax evasion and fraud. They're desperate for money." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the life insurance policies. When the boys were small, I had taken out life insurance policies on each of them. Small policies meant to cover funeral expenses if something terrible happened. But there was another set of policies, ones I'd forgotten about, that Robert had taken out when the boys first came to live with us. Policies that would pay out substantial amounts when each boy turned 18. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a document. Michael's policy paid out $50,000 on his 18th birthday. Tyler's paid out the same amount. Brandon's is set to pay out in September, and as his legal guardian, Jessica would have access to that money. My hands shook as I read the investigator's report. Jessica and Craig were in serious financial trouble. They'd borrowed against their house, maxed out credit cards, and Craig's legal troubles were mounting. The insurance money wasn't just wanted. It was desperately needed. But there was more. The investigator had found Jessica's social media accounts, photos of her and Craig living it up in expensive restaurants and vacation spots over the past year. Posts about shopping sprees and casino trips. This wasn't a woman who had spent 15 years rebuilding her life and preparing to be a mother. This was a woman who had been living carelessly and was now facing the consequences. "Sarah, she doesn't want her son back. She wants his insurance money." "I know. And we're going to prove it." When court reconvened, Sarah asked for permission to present new evidence. Judge Martinez, clearly sensing that something significant was happening, allowed it. "Your Honor, the defense would like to call Craig Hoffman to testify." Jessica's face went white. Craig, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom trying to look supportive, suddenly looked like he wanted to run. He was a thin, nervous man with darting eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd been caught. Sarah's questioning was surgical. Within 10 minutes, she had Craig admitting to the federal charges, to their financial problems, and to knowing about Brandon's insurance policy. When she asked if he and Jessica had discussed using the insurance money to pay for his legal defense, he tried to lie. But Sarah had phone records. "Mr. Hoffman, isn't it true that you told Jessica, and I quote, 'We need that kid's money, whatever it takes'?" That was taken out of context." "Context? You were discussing taking custody of a 17-year-old boy for the purpose of accessing his insurance policy. What context makes that acceptable?" The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Jessica crying. But these weren't tears of maternal anguish. These were tears of a plan falling apart. Sarah then called the investigator to the stand, who testified about Jessica's spending habits, her lack of employment, and the timeline of her sudden interest in custody that coincided perfectly with her financial troubles. Judge Martinez called for another recess, and this time Jessica and Craig huddled with their lawyer in heated conversation. I could see Craig getting more agitated and Jessica looking desperate. That's when the confrontation happened. I was walking back from the restroom when I heard voices in the stairwell. Jessica and Craig were arguing, and their voices carried in the echo of the concrete stairs. "This is your fault," Craig was saying. "You said this would be easy, that the old lady wouldn't fight back." "How was I supposed to know she'd hire a PI?" Jessica shot back. "You're the one who said we needed the money now." "We do need it now. My trial starts in 2 months. If I go to prison, we lose everything anyway." I stood frozen, listening to them discuss my grandson like he was a financial asset. "Maybe we should just take what we can get," Jessica said. "Visitation, some kind of relationship. At least then—" "No." Craig's voice was sharp. "It's all or nothing. Once he turns 18, we get nothing. This is our only shot." That's when I stepped into view. "Your only shot at what, Jessica?" They both froze like deer in headlights. Jessica tried to recover, to put on the grieving mother act, but it was too late. I had heard enough. 17 years, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. 17 years I've loved that boy, and you want him for his insurance money. That's not, Jessica started, but I cut her off. I raised you better than this. I taught you right from wrong. How did you become someone who would use her own child like this? Jessica's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be. I didn't have a choice, Mom. Craig's in real trouble. There's always a choice, Jessica. I made mine 15 years ago when I chose those boys. You're making yours now. I walked away from them and went straight to Sarah. They're going to run, I told her. Craig's trial starts in 2 months and they know they've lost here. They're going to disappear before this gets worse. Sarah immediately called the court security and requested that Jessica and Craig not be allowed to leave the building. 20 minutes later, federal marshals walked into the courthouse. Craig Hoffman was arrested on his outstanding federal warrants right there in the hallway, and Jessica finally understood that her get-rich-quick scheme had just turned into the biggest mistake of her life. The arrest happened so fast it felt surreal. One moment, Craig was whispering frantically to Jessica outside the courtroom. The next moment, federal marshals were reading him his rights while courthouse security held back curious onlookers. Jessica stood frozen, watching her husband being led away in handcuffs, finally understanding that her plan hadn't just failed, it had spectacularly backfired. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Martinez was clearly shaken by the turn of events. Ms. Williams, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you file this custody petition for the purpose of gaining access to your son's life insurance policy? Jessica's lawyer tried to object, but Jessica herself stopped him. She looked older than her 41 years, defeated and exhausted. Your Honor, I need to speak with my attorney. Take all the time you need, Judge Martinez said grimly. But I'll tell you right now, this court takes a very dim view of using the legal system to defraud insurance companies or manipulate custody for financial gain. During the recess, I watched Jessica sitting alone at her table, her head in her hands. Part of me, the part that remembered the little girl who used to braid my hair and tell me I was the prettiest grandma in the world, wanted to comfort her. But the larger part of me, the part that had spent 15 years protecting my grandsons, felt only cold anger. Sarah leaned over to me. Victoria, I think she's going to fold. Her lawyer knows this is over. She was right. When court reconvened, Jessica's attorney made a motion to withdraw the custody petition. Your Honor, my client would like to dismiss her petition and work toward establishing a relationship with her children outside of the court system. But Judge Martinez wasn't done. Ms. Williams, stand up, please. Jessica rose on shaky legs. In my 30 years on this bench, I have never seen a more cynical abuse of the family court system. You abandoned 3 small children, made no effort to support or contact them for 15 years, and then returned only when financial desperation made them useful to you. Your actions have traumatized not only your children, but also the grandmother who stepped in to give them the love and stability you denied them. The judge's voice was cold with disapproval. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into possible fraud and perjury charges. Additionally, I am issuing a restraining order preventing you from contacting Brandon Williams until he reaches the age of 18, at which point he can make his own decisions about any relationship with you. Jessica sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. But I noticed they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Within a week, the district attorney filed charges against Jessica for attempted fraud and perjury. Her marriage to Craig, already strained by his legal troubles, dissolved completely when he tried to blame the entire scheme on her from his jail cell. Jessica was facing the possibility of 2 years in prison and hefty fines. But the real consequences were measured in broken relationships and lost opportunities. Michael and Tyler, who had been willing to give their mother a chance despite everything, were disgusted by her motives. Michael came over the night after the trial and sat at my kitchen table with his head in his hands. Grandma, I feel so stupid. When she first showed up, part of me hoped, I hoped maybe she really did want to be our mother. You're not stupid, honey. You wanted to believe the best about her. That's because you have a good heart. Tyler was even more hurt. As the sensitive middle child, he had always carried the most pain about Jessica's abandonment. She never loved us at all, did she? We were just, what, an investment? A backup plan? Those conversations broke my heart. I had tried so hard over the years to help them understand that Jessica's leaving wasn't their fault, that sometimes people are just too broken to love properly. But this revelation, that she had come back not out of love but out of greed, was a wound I wasn't sure would ever heal. Brandon, surprisingly, handled it best. Maybe because he barely remembered Jessica, or maybe because at 17 he was old enough to see the situation clearly. The night after the trial, he hugged me tight and said, Grandma, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm not sorry it happened. What do you mean? Now I know for sure. You didn't steal us from her. You saved us. The legal resolution took several months. Jessica eventually pled guilty to the fraud charges and received 18 months probation and community service. The restraining order remained in place until Brandon's 18th birthday, but when that day came in September, he made it clear he had no interest in seeing her. The insurance money that had caused all this trouble? Brandon used it exactly as I'd hoped, for his college education. He put every penny toward his tuition at Appalachian State, determined to build a life based on his own efforts, not on anyone else's plans for him. As for Craig, his federal trial resulted in a 3-year prison sentence. The house he and Jessica had shared was sold to pay restitution, and Jessica moved into a small apartment across town. Sometimes I'd see her at the grocery store, and she'd look away quickly, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't hate her anymore. I just felt sad for the woman who had thrown away everything real in pursuit of money that was never really hers to begin with. In the months following the trial, our family began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. It was as if facing Jessica's betrayal together had strengthened the bonds between the 4 of us, making us realize how precious what we had really was. The boys, my boys, seemed to stand a little taller, love a little deeper, and appreciate what we'd built together even more. Brandon's senior year was everything a grandmother could hope for. He played varsity baseball, maintained a 3.8 GPA, and was accepted to Appalachian State with a partial academic scholarship. When graduation day came in May 2024, I sat in those bleachers watching him walk across that stage, and my heart nearly burst with pride. This was the little 4-year-old who had once asked me if I was going away too, now a confident young man ready to take on the world. But the real surprise came that summer, just before Brandon left for college. I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the cool mountain evening and watching the fireflies dance in my garden, when all 3 boys pulled into my driveway at the same time. That was unusual. They had their own lives, their own schedules. Michael was working at a marketing firm downtown. Tyler was freelancing as a graphic designer, and Brandon was working construction to save money for college expenses. "Grandma, we need to talk," Michael said, and my heart skipped a beat. Those words never led to good news. They sat on my porch swing and the steps, surrounding me like they used to do when they were small, and wanted to convince me to let them stay up late or have ice cream for breakfast. "We've been talking," Tyler said, "about everything that happened with Mom, about the trial, about what it all means." "And we realized something," Brandon added. "You spent 15 years fighting for us, protecting us, giving us everything you had. But we never really fought for you." I started to protest, but Michael held up his hand. "Let us finish, Grandma. We're adults now, and we want to do something for you for once." That's when they told me their plan. They had been secretly working together for months, pooling their money, talking to contractors, and making arrangements. They had bought the house next door, the one owned by Mrs. Patterson, who had moved to assisted living, and were renovating it for me. "It's bigger than this house," Tyler explained excitedly. "Single level, so no more stairs to worry about. A huge kitchen with an island where we can all fit for Sunday dinners. And the best part, it backs up to the same mountain view you love, but with a screened porch where you can sit and watch the sunrise." I sat there speechless, tears streaming down my face as they described their vision. They had thought of everything. Wider doorways in case I ever needed a wheelchair, a master bathroom with a walk-in shower, a garden area already planned and planted with my favorite flowers. "But boys, I can't let you spend your money on me. You have your own lives to build, your own futures to secure." "Grandma," Brandon said softly, "you mortgaged this house twice to pay for our school clothes and baseball equipment and college applications. You worked double shifts at the hospital until you were 65. You gave us everything. This is our turn." The house was beautiful. They had kept all the original mountain character, the stone fireplace, the hardwood floors, the big windows that framed the view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. But they had updated everything else, creating a space that was both cozy and modern, accessible and elegant. Moving day was like a celebration. The boys enlisted friends to help, and before I knew it, half of West Asheville was carrying boxes and furniture from my old house to my new one. Mrs. Chen from down the street brought sandwiches for everyone. The pastor from our church stopped by to bless the new home. Even some of the nurses I used to work with at the hospital showed up to help. That first night in my new house, as I sat on my screened porch listening to the night sounds of the mountains and watching the stars appear over the ridgeline, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Not just because of the beautiful house, but because of what it represented, 3 young men who had chosen to honor the woman who raised them. The surprises didn't stop there. In August, just before Brandon left for college, Tyler came to me with a stack of legal papers. "Grandma, we've been thinking about something else. We want to change our last names." "What do you mean?" "We want to take your name, Williams. We want to be Michael Williams, Tyler Williams, and Brandon Williams. Officially." I stared at the papers in shock. "But boys, your birth certificates, your father's names?" "Those men were sperm donors," Michael said bluntly. "You're our family. You're the one who raised us, who loved us, who fought for us. We want the world to know that we're yours." The legal process took a few months, but by Christmas 2024, all three boys had officially changed their last names to Williams. When Brandon came home from his first semester at App State, he showed me his new student ID, Brandon Williams. Tyler updated his business cards, Tyler Williams, graphic design. Michael had new business cards too, Michael Williams, marketing specialist. We celebrated that Christmas in my new house, around a dinner table big enough for all of us and any guests we wanted to invite. As we sat there laughing and sharing stories from the year, I looked around at these three remarkable young men and marveled at the journey that had brought us here. Michael, now 24, had been promoted to marketing manager and was dating a sweet nurse named Sarah who worked at Mission Hospital. Tyler, 22, had landed a contract with a major tourism company to design their marketing materials, and his art was starting to get recognition around Asheville. Brandon, 19, was thriving at App State, majoring in business like his oldest brother, and playing club baseball. But more than their individual successes, I was proud of who they had become as people. They were kind, responsible, generous men who understood the value of family loyalty and hard work. They called me every few days, visited regularly, and still came to me for advice when life got complicated. The legal victory over Jessica had been important, but this chosen family, this conscious decision to honor our bonds and build our future together, this was the real triumph. In February 2025, I got the call I'd been expecting, but dreading. Jessica had been arrested again, this time for writing bad checks. She was looking at jail time, and her court-appointed lawyer wanted to know if any of us would speak as character witnesses. The boys didn't hesitate. "No," Michael said when I told them. "She made her choices. We've made ours." I felt the same way. I had forgiven Jessica for my own peace of mind, but forgiveness didn't mean enabling or rescuing someone who refused to change. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. Instead of dwelling on Jessica's continuing downward spiral, we focused on building the life we wanted. I started volunteering at a local organization that helps grandparents who are raising grandchildren. Apparently, there are thousands of us in North Carolina alone. Sharing my story and offering support to other families in similar situations gave me a new sense of purpose. The boys surprised me again in the spring by planning a family vacation, our first real vacation together. We spent a week in a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, hiking and fishing and just enjoying each other's company. Sitting around the campfire one evening, watching my grandsons roast marshmallows and argue about who made the best s'mores, I realized that this was what victory looked like. Not the courtroom triumph, though that had been necessary. Not the public vindication or Jessica's downfall. Victory looked like three young men who had chosen love over biology, who had built their identities around the values they'd been taught rather than the circumstances they'd been born into. Victory looked like family, real family, chosen family, the kind of family that shows up day after day, year after year, through every challenge and celebration life brings. Now, as I sit here in my beautiful kitchen with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the mountains rising up beyond my screened porch, I want to share something with every grandmother, every caregiver, every person who has ever stepped up to raise children who weren't biologically theirs. You are not stealing anyone's children. You are saving them. When I took custody of Michael, Tyler, and Brandon 15 years ago, I thought I was making a temporary sacrifice, filling in until their mother could get her life together. I never imagined I was building a family that would choose each other over and over again, through every storm and every celebration. The courtroom battle with Jessica taught me something important. Love isn't about biology or legal documents or even good intentions. Love is about showing up. It's about being present for the mundane Tuesday afternoon homework sessions and the terrifying 3 a.m. emergency room visits. It's about staying when things get difficult, fighting when your family is threatened, and choosing each other every single day. Jessica gave birth to those boys, but I raised them. She contributed DNA, but I contributed everything else: patience, consistency, sacrifice, and unconditional love. When the chips were down and she had to choose between her children and money, she chose money. When I had to choose between my comfortable retirement and 3 traumatized little boys, I chose them. That's the difference between a biological parent and a real parent. I think about all the grandparents out there who are in similar situations, maybe not facing custody battles, but raising grandchildren because their own children can't or won't. To you, I want to say, what you're doing matters. Those children may not understand now, when they're small and confused and asking why mommy or daddy isn't coming home. But they will understand someday, and when they do, they'll honor you the way my boys honored me. I also want to speak to the adult children who were raised by grandparents, aunts, uncles, or other family members. You don't owe your biological parents a relationship you don't want. You don't have to forgive people who haven't changed or make room in your life for people who abandoned you. The people who raised you, who showed up for you, who sacrificed for you. Those are your real parents, regardless of what any birth certificate says. And if you're facing a legal challenge like I faced, document everything. Keep every school paper, every medical form, every photo of birthday parties and Christmas mornings. Keep records of who attended parent-teacher conferences and soccer games and school plays. Love shows up in 1,000 small ways, and sometimes you need to prove that love in a courtroom full of strangers. Justice isn't always immediate, and it's not always loud. Sometimes justice looks like 3 young men changing their last names to honor the woman who raised them. Sometimes it looks like a new house with a screened porch and room for the whole family to gather. Sometimes it's as quiet as a phone call every Sunday afternoon, or as simple as knowing that when life gets hard, there are people who will show up for you. If this story of chosen family and fighting for what's right touched your heart, like this video right now, tell me in the comments about the family members who chose you or the children you've chosen to love, and subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because every grandparent deserves to have their story heard and their sacrifice honored. My name is Victoria Williams. I'm 67 years old, and I'm the proud grandmother of 3 remarkable young men who chose my name and my heart as their own. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. Consistency does. Showing up does. And when you show up for the children in your life, you're not just changing their story. You're writing a legacy of love that will last for generations.